And that insight turned out to be exactly correct. A flush toilet in those days in Haiti used a little bit more than the average amount of water a Haitian has for an entire day. That amount is about 2.5 gallons. Those buckets that you'll be carrying over there are 5-gallon buckets. That means that about half a bucket full of water, on average, is the amount of water that a Haitian person has for all uses in a single day. That means for washing your hands, for scrubbing the vegetables, for cooking the rice, for doing the dishes after dinner, and for bathing and doing the laundry. 1/2 a bucket of water. Your access to water in Haiti depends a lot on where you live and what your status is. So if you live in Port-au-Prince, in sort of that well-to-do neighborhood that I described before, you probably get your water delivered in a tanker truck and deposited into a cistern that sits in your front yard. And because you have access to electricity, either municipal electricity or a generator, or probably both, you can pump that water up to what they call a chateau d'eau, a little reservoir on the top of your house, and then it flows down through the plumbing of your house, and you could flush your toilet as often as you liked. However, you couldn't drink that water. So you'd have to buy water that you could drink. You can do that in a 5-gallon carboy, they call it, that you can get in many kiosks throughout Port-au-Prince and even in the larger towns throughout the country. It's purified by reverse osmosis. That 5-gallon jug costs about 25 goods in Haitian currency. In US money, that's 50 cents. An almost insignificant amount of money for 5 gallons of drinkable water. Until you recall that about 80% of the people in Haiti live on incomes of less than $2 a day. And half the population of Haiti subsists on an income of less than $1 a day. Suddenly, that 5-gallon jug of water that you could drink safely becomes an unaffordable luxury. So you might be able to buy a little sack of water for a few pennies on the street. They sell them in little plastic baggies, if you will. If you couldn't do that, you might, as I've seen often enough, you might buy a cup full of water in an unwashed cup that a lady will dip out of a bucket of water that hasn't been purified. And you can probably get that for a penny. And if you couldn't afford that, you might be like that gentleman whom I met on that very first day in Haiti, reduced to drinking out of the ditch. If you live in rural Haiti, you would access water differently. In the towns, you would have a public tap that either comes from a well or possibly from springs up in the mountain, where the water is captured in a reservoir and piped throughout the city. That water would be unpurified, and the sources might be contaminated. You wouldn't know that, so I would certainly advise you not to drink that. In the more rural parts of the country, you would take your water directly from a river or from a stream, or from a freshwater spring, if you're fortunate enough to have such. I had an American friend who lived in one of the villages where we've worked, called Fondwa, and she was there as a volunteer for 4 years as a nurse. And because she intended to live as closely as she could to the way that the Haitians she was going to be working side by side with lived, she lived in a little 2-room house, and she had to carry her own water. Now, being an American woman, she had that can-do mentality, but she wasn't quite as strong as Haitian women who have been carrying buckets of water from the time they were children. Haitian women will carry a 5-gallon bucket weighing about 40 pounds on the top of their head, balancing it there and not spilling a drop. Wow. However, 40 pounds was a little bit more than my friend Sue could manage for herself. She could do about a gallon jug, or maybe 2-gallon jugs at a time. And in her words, she said, in the 4 years that I lived in Fondwa, I became completely obsessed with water. Because she had to be thinking when she was going to run out, how much she needed, where she would get it, and she had to carry her jugs to a small stream that originated from a spring. She would make a funnel out of banana leaves to channel the water from that little stream into her gallon jug. It would normally take about 20 minutes to fill, but in the dry season, it could take up to 40 or 45 minutes to fill her jug. There were two French volunteers, young people about your ages, that worked in Fondbois for a couple of years. And they did a study there that revealed about 25% of the people living in Fondbois spend up to 3 hours every single day just getting water. It's hard to wrap your head around something like that. 3 hours every day. I really couldn't conceive of that or appreciate it. But I was fundraising for a project to capture water from a number of the springs in Fondbois, and I brought a former student of mine who's a civil engineer with experience in water projects to Fondbois, and we went down by the main source that we were planning to capture so that we could make water more accessible to more people there. And we were just sitting there watching the women coming and going with their buckets, and I would greet some of them and make small talk with some of the ladies that were coming there. And once one woman came down with her bucket, and of course the water source is downhill. You come with an empty bucket to the water source, and then you fill it, and of course then you have to carry it uphill. She lived maybe 15, 20 minutes away from the source, which meant she could walk down with her empty bucket in 15 or 20 minutes. It took her a little longer to go uphill with a 40-pound bucket. I watched her do that, and then I took my former student friend around to survey the pipeline where the pipe was going to go. We were going to walk that. And about a half hour later, I saw the same woman coming back with her bucket again. It was like another light bulb experience went on in my head, and I realized that that woman has a typical household of about 5 or 6 people, and to work out that average amount of water per person per day in Haiti, she would need 3 buckets of water. And it took her somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes to make that trip to the source and back to her home. To get 3 buckets of water, that was 3 hours every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year that she had to do that. We've been involved with a number of water projects in Haiti. We work with the Little Sisters of St. Antoine. We've done a water capture project to harvest rainwater for them at their novitiate house. We've done a renovation of a city water system or a town water system in the village of Deslandes, one of those where water comes from springs in the mountain and is distributed in the city. It was put in place more than 30 years ago, and little or no maintenance had been done on it. We were able to finance the renovation of that system, and we're currently involved in raising funds for a well project where a well has failed near a school of 500 children and a clinic, and they need to replace it as soon as possible. So we're working with that currently. You know, Pope Francis has written in his encyclical letter Laudato Si, which I hope many of you will read, one of the problems that he points to in the world today is the lack of access to water, and especially of poor people, their lack of access to clean water. So your organizations here that are represented today that are working to increase the access to water, just the sheer amount of water, and to increase the potability of water that's available in countries like Haiti and Tanzania and elsewhere in the world, are doing a very important work. One that the Holy Father endorses by saying that access to water, because our lives depend on it, is a human right, a right not to be denied, because life depends on it. The Holy Father also says that we continue to waste a lot of water, and we waste a lot of things in our culture of consumption, and so he urges us to rethink the way that we live our lives so that they are less wasteful. Yeah. I would hope that maybe those 3 images that I gave you, hosing a Mercedes, drinking from a ditch, flushing a toilet, you might ask yourself, where am I amidst those images now? They are still very vivid in my memory almost 30 years after those experiences. And maybe they can motivate us to question the way in which we live, quantities in which we waste, and be motivated to change our lifestyles. I wish you well in the water walk today. Let those steps that you take on the water walk be the first steps to a journey of a new way of living on what Pope Francis calls our common home. Thank you, and good luck to all of you. Woo!